We're living in the most connected generation in human history. Yet, people have never felt more anxious, alone, overwhelmed. Why? Something is deeply wrong, and it's time we ask the hard questions. Hi, my name is Kumal. I'm an accountant by day and an avid reader by night. And in these videos, I like to explain and synthesize what I've learned in a way that makes sense. This video will be a two-part series on anxiety, anxiousness, and depression. Why are we so anxious? Why is this generation such an anxious generation? And in this video, I'd like to look at some of the causes that have led to so much anxiety and overwhelm and depression in our societies and communities. And in the following video, in the next video of the second part of this series, I want to look at some of the solutions that we can use to help us overcome anxiety and anxiousness for anyone who's feeling it, or ourselves if we are feeling it too. So for the purpose of this video, I'd like to explain 3 reasons why our society is so anxious and so overwhelmed with anxiety and depression. Why has it afflicted us so much? And these 3 reasons hopefully will show us and give us the reasons, because the reasons are going to be important when you look at the second video, when you look at the tools on how to overcome anxiety. It's important to know what causes anxiety in the first place before we can look at solutions. Jonathan Haidt is an American psychologist and author, and he published a book last year in March 2024 called The Anxious Generation. And in this book, he explains how anxiety is such a big problem amongst the youth of today. And if it's a big problem for everyone, to be honest, not just the youth, but he talks about the youth specifically. And if you look at the stats of the book sold over 1 million copies. It was a New York Times bestselling on the New York Times bestselling list for 59 weeks, and 52 of those weeks there were consecutive weeks. So this tells us that the fact that so many people bought this book, it shows that anxiety is such a big problem that people are grappling with this issue, and they want to know more about it, and more importantly, what can they do to overcome so much anxiety and grief. Now, for me, there are 3 reasons I'd like to look at in this video of why we have anxiety and grief and depression in our society that we live in. The first reason that I'd like to look at for this video is social media. Social media is such an overwhelming reason why people are so anxious. When we look at the highlight reels of people's lives, the dopamine hits from social media, where we see people's good times, people's amazing filters that they use to show how amazing their lives are. And when we compare their amazing lives to our mundane life, of course we'll feel anxious and we'll feel depressed and we'll feel like we are missing out in life. They are traveling the world and they have the best relationship, they have the best food that you can think of, they have the best of everything. And we are just stuck here with the mundane things. We have to go to work, do a 9-to-5 job. We might not have the best relationship, we might not have the best financial situation, and they have everything you would ever dream of. But really, if you look behind the highlight reel, it's full of problems. Full of problems. The grass is always green on the other side. And that's what happens with social media, because in social media, you have these filtered versions of people where you just look at their highlight reels. You look at Instagram reels and you think this is their life, but actually it's their picture perfect life that they want you to see. But their real life is not that life. That's just a fake version of their life. And when I look at all of their glamorous lives, I feel like I'm missing out. But really, you need to look behind that glamorous life, because there's a whole world behind that. And when I start comparing myself to these people, I'm going to naturally feel depressed and overwhelmed and anxious, when I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be, because my life is perfect the way it is. It was perfect before I looked at their life. It was amazing before I looked at their life. Even if I have difficulties, if I have problems, I'm still breathing. I'm alive. The fact that I can watch these videos, I can make a video like this, the fact that I'm sitting in in a place where I don't have bombs falling over my head, or I'm scared to leave the house, is in itself something to be so grateful for. But when I look at other people's lives, I forget that. I forget that, and I think, oh, I wish I had their life. As they say, constant comparison is a silent killer of contentment. Constant comparison is the silent killer of contentment. If we don't have this contentment, we'll never be happy. We'll never be happy. Look at Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps, when you think he's got a picture perfect life because he earned all those gold medals. He's very vocal about this. When he got those gold medals, he was depressed. He was depressed because he knew that he'd achieved everything he wanted. And then what next? But you look at his Instagram reels and you think, wow, he has the best life ever. All the money, all the fame, being an Olympic gold medalist. What more can you ask for? I have some medals behind me that I'm very proud of. But I mean, you think of him and you think, oh wow, like I wish I could be that. But then when you realize his life is actually, he's depressed. He's depressed because he's achieved everything he wanted to achieve, and now he's going through this inner turmoil. So just because someone's picture perfect life looks picture perfect doesn't mean it is picture perfect. I'd like to recommend a book called Digital Minimalism by Carl Newport, where he actually talks about social media and how maybe if we live a digital minimalist life, we might be happier, where we disconnect ourselves, choosing a focused life in a noisy world, when we disconnect ourselves from this noise that is distracting us and taking us away from the things we need to be focusing on and making us depressed and overwhelmed and anxious. Maybe it's time we start fasting from social media. Stop looking at so many Instagram reels and comparing ourselves. Maybe deactivate our accounts, because that is one of the reasons why we are so anxious. Now, the second reason why we have so much anxiety and depression in this world is because of this information overload and constant stimulation. Everywhere we look, we have constant dopamine hits, constant hits of alerts and notifications and news flashes and updates and all of these things. Even our advertisements, if you look at the billboards, they're no longer constant. They're constantly moving. They're not static images. They're constantly moving, constantly like occupying our mind and our attention. Of course we feel overwhelmed because there's just so much happening around us that we cannot take a step back and just breathe. If you look at caveman days, we never had this much information. We never had so much information to occupy our minds with. When they'd come back after a long day, they just sit around the fire and read stories. They quieten the mind. They say anxiety thrives on noise, and that's what we have at the moment currently. We have so much noise around us that it's hard to decipher the true things and the constant chatter the white noise that we should overlook. It's very hard. In fact, there's a study called the paradox of choice, where in a supermarket, what they did was they had some jams laid out and they wanted to see how many people buy jams. So in one part of the experiment, they had 24 different types of jams. And they had a lot of people queuing around and looking at the jams, but no one really bought any of the jams. And then for the second part of the experiment, they had only 6 types of jams. They had fewer people who queued around, but people actually bought the jams. More people bought the jams, because when you have a choice of 6 out of a choice of 24, it's easy to make the choice. But now you go to the supermarket, it's so overwhelming. Even the cereals, like morning cereals, you have so many different types of porridges, so many different types of Kellogg's cereals, supermarkets' own brands. There's so much you can choose from that it is no wonder we feel anxious, because it's an overwhelming area where everything is constantly bombarding our minds, and there is no space for silence and for clarity and for quietness, just for relaxing. No wonder we can't meditate, because this constant chatter happening. How are you going to meditate? How are you going to quieten the mind down if this is happening all the time? How are you going to do it? No wonder we are so anxious. So for me, that is the second reason why we have so much anxiety and so much depression and all of these feeling of loneliness in the societies that we live in, because of this constant chatter and constant information overload and not being able to decipher the truth or what is important from what is all of the white noise that we should ignore. And the third reason that I think, for me personally, why we have so much anxiety, depression and loneliness in this world is because we have felt this sense of disconnection from meaning and spirituality. Through the Industrial Revolution, when the West especially started looking at more of a capitalistic society and more of a socialistic society, more of a capitalistic society, possibly not socialism, but definitely capitalism, and this whole hedonistic lifestyle where you're looking at pleasure and constant dopamine hits and all of these things, where life is all about a utilitarian approach where you just want goodness, you just want to have fun, not goodness, you just want to have fun in life. That's all you want, just to enjoy it to your heart's content. That's fine. But then there reaches a time when the more you enjoy, the less pleasurable it becomes. And you can ask anyone who's an addict. If you have cocaine for the first time, it gives you such a high hit. Not that I've tried it, so I'm not saying from experience, but I've heard about this and I've read about this. But the more you have it, the more you need to have, because if you look at dopamine, the way it works is, so you have dopamine, you get a constant hit. As soon as you get the hit, it goes up. But then when it falls, it doesn't fall to the baseline. No. It falls below the baseline. So the next time, you need to have a bit more than you had previously just to get to the baseline so that you can get a higher hit. And then when it falls even lower. So the third time that you have drugs or whatever it is, you need even more to just reach the baseline, because you're already used to the pleasure that you get out of it. So from here to here, this is like a black hole. It is like a black space, because you're so used to that pleasure that it's no longer pleasurable like it used to be. And the more you do it, the more you keep on need to doing it. And that's why you get addicted to this. And then it's so hard to break away from the cycle. It's so hard. But the reason and the purpose, the reason why this happens is because of a lack of meaning and purpose in life. When I have nothing to live for, when I have no purpose, no value, no connection, nothing to look up to, of something that is greater to me, something that is more purposeful. The reason that I am alive and breathing in this world, if there is no such cause and reason for me, then of course I'm going to be anxious and overwhelmed, because of the previous thing we spoke about, where we compare ourselves on social media to other people and we have this constant stimulation of overload. Of course we'll be depressed, because we're not living towards a higher purpose. For me, God created me for a reason. He created me to fulfill my purpose, and whatever that purpose is all different for everyone. It's something that we need to look for in life, and it's something that I will explore in future videos as well, because I think purpose is really important. I have spoken about purpose in life in previous videos too, but it's something that we should really aspire towards and look towards, because without a purpose, without having this sense of belonging and sense of achievement and sense of working towards something, we will constantly chase these dopamine hits of constant validation and constant need to be praised and constant need to have fun and constant need to have these mundane pleasures of life, that after a while they're no longer pleasurable. What is the point? What is even the point if we don't have a purpose to live for? When the goal is empty, our mind becomes restless. When there is no goal to look forward to, our mind becomes so restless, because there's nothing there to occupy us and to help us. So, in summary, I basically stated that there are 3 reasons why we feel anxious in today's generation. Number 1 is social media, and this constant need to be connected to the world. And I recommended this book called Digital Minimalism by Carl Newport to help us to disconnect. Number 2 was this constant information overload, that stimulates us all the time, and we don't have a quiet moment, and no wonder we feel so anxious. And number 3 is a lack of purpose and a lack of meaning in life that causes us to feel more anxious because we have nothing to live for. But when you start having something to live for, then hopefully that will overcome our anxiety. Anxiety is not just a personal problem, it's a societal problem, it's a societal epidemic. It has spread wide through society, and if we don't change how we live, think and connect, we'll keep watching a generation drowning in silence. It's time to wake up before anxiety becomes our default way of life. Thank you very much. Until next time, see you soon.